In today's episode, we have Ali Damron with us, and she's going to talk about how to effectively use webinars to sell more of your online courses. You will also get to hear her story from transitioning from a brick and mortar business into the online world, why studying and learning the skills you need to be successful is so vital to your business, and why consistently showing up will help you with achieving your goals. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Online Course Igniter podcast, where you'll hear from successful course creators and how they were able to turn their passion into a thriving online business empire. What's up, everyone? Thank you for listening to the show today. We have a great guest with us, Ali Damron, who is an expert in women's hormones. And I'm super excited to have you on the show today to talk about your journey into business and creating your own programs. I think this is going to be a terrific episode. How are you doing today, Ali?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this.
Yeah, this will be great. And I always like hearing, everyone's stories. And it's really cool being a podcast host because I get to have people like yourself come on and hear your story. And everyone's story is so different that I found. And so I think it'll be exciting to hear where you've come from and how you've grown your business. So if you could just take a moment and tell us, what were you doing before you got into online business? And then how did you get into this world?
Yeah, so I've had a really interesting journey with this. So by nature, I'm an acupuncturist. Back in 2010, Pat Flynn was coming into the world and this was sort of becoming a thing. And my now husband, then boyfriend, and I and a friend were just so intrigued by the online business and kind of like the Tim Ferriss world where work wherever, that sort of a thing. And so we all kind of became intrigued by it and kind of tried it out. We did a bunch of different websites and courses and blogs and those types of things. So we had some experience. And then I just kind of decided, it was around the market crash and I was young and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I actually decided to go to acupuncture school. And I went there, had this dream of opening a wellness center, a brick and mortar and an in-person one, and kind of started there, did that for a little while. But I just still felt in the back of my mind, sort of this getting paid for your time was hard, right? So going on, especially as self-employed, going on vacations was just dipping into my pocket and I'm not getting paid. And if people canceled, that was just less money for me. And, I just was I really want to do something scalable. And by this time, Pat Flynn, Amy Porterfield, all these great big people were just crushing it online and talking about it way more. And I was I just still really had this desire to do that. I loved my practice in my office and everything. But like I said, there were just downfalls of that. So I started kind of dipping my feet into it, just trying different blogs. I did a podcast called The Mother and Me when my kids were babies, and eventually got really serious about it. Probably now we're talking about 5.5 years ago. And I was okay, there's so many people doing digital courses, are making tons of money online. They're having freedom. They're passionate about this. It's exciting. It's scalable. So I'm really going to dive in. So I actually hired a business coach who had her own fitness program that was just super successful. And she was also doing business coaching. And so I just started dipping my feet in. And to be honest, I started with fitness nutrition, sort of boot camps, I guess you could say. And my business has completely transformed. And I think that that's always the interesting thing about this journey, right? Is that your business is just completely or continuously, I guess, transforming into different offerings and different niches. And maybe it's the same sort of overall niche, but different things. And I think your audience just continues to kind of ask you what they want from you. And so it just kind of morphs all the time, which is much different, obviously, than a brick and mortar.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I mean, when I started an online business, probably about 8 or 9 years ago now, I was selling T-shirts online because I had a T-shirt screen printing company. With the T-shirt printing business, we had to have tons of inventory. You had to have the equipment. I was, living in a small place and didn't have a lot of room, and so I was oh, I'll go into selling t-shirts online. I found out you could do that, made some money with it. Then someone mentioned online courses, and then I started teaching graphic design, and that led into other people saying, can you help me create my own online course? And then here we are today, so
Yeah, it's just so interesting, right? Like you just like start with something. And I think, that's just such an advice that I give to people who like are desiring this. What you start with today is probably going to be very different from where you end up, but that's fine. It's just like part of the journey, right? Of like just starting.
yeah, that is absolutely great advice. Advice I need to listen to myself sometimes. My wife even has to remind me, like, Jeremy, you came and you've done so much stuff, and this might not be the end thing either. It might turn into something else. It's okay. We have to remind ourselves of that. You want to have the ability to pick something and that be like your forever thing, and the world just doesn't work like that. So it's really cool to hear you talk about that. So you decided, okay, you were doing this blog and you were doing your like a fitness boot camp. So let's talk about that for a minute. What were these fitness boot camps like when you were starting those out?
Okay, so I actually initially went to this business coach to do more like a course for birth workers and pregnant women. I was teaching a course in person that was like acupressure for birth and pregnancy. And so I was like, I think that I could make this scalable and just do it online instead of actually teaching it in person. And this woman, like, she's a great business coach. She's super, super successful, but she was like, I was a personal trainer back in the day too. So I have that knowledge because that's what she did. So she's like, well, why don't you just do this? And I was like, all right, I guess I can do that too, because she just was able to help me more, I think, in that realm. And so that's where I started. And so it was just like, I think it was a 6-week group where we like did nutrition and I put out some workouts, and it was like I guess kind of like a weight loss program for 6 weeks. And then they could sign up for obviously like more sessions or whatever. And it was fine, but I had to kind of like get back to my roots with it and be like, okay, I was a personal trainer back in the day. And then I decided to become an acupuncturist for a reason. Weight loss was like, in training and all of that stuff was just really not my passion. And so I kind of started to notice that. And I don't know if you've gone through this too, but honestly, I had such a small following when I started that I went through my following like within 6 months. Like I kept launching every 8 weeks or whatever. And I was just like squeezing a wet rag, like trying to get people to trickle into this program. And so then I had to kind of like stop, reset, and be like, okay, this is not working. I need to like get a foundation here, get some followers, have a message, something that I'm passionate about. And so that's when I kind of like retransformed into like hormones and found that niche, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's super important. It's important to get started just so you can get the ball moving and you can learn and you can develop some skills. And then as you go, you kind of morph and you kind of realize, what is it that I am passionate about? What is it that I can help people with? If fitness isn't really your passion and this other type of industry is, it's great that you made that transition. So you decide to yourself, okay, I kind of want to focus more on women's health, women's hormones. And then where did you go from there? So what was the next step? Did you start blogging or did you start coaching people or what were the next steps after you stopped the boot camps and then went in this new direction?
After that, I decided to start a podcast actually. So part of this was like just figuring out my own gifts. Like there's a million hormone people out there too, but there's a million fitness people. And me posing like in that way on Instagram and stuff like that's just not really my thing. And so I was like, I am gifted at hormones. I have an education in this. Like, this is the direction I should go. And so I started my podcast and just started talking about questions I was getting all the time, honestly, like stuff about menstrual cycles and pregnancy and perimenopause and night sweats and insomnia, like just all these different questions I was always getting. And so I started this podcast. And at the same time, then people were actually asking me to help them online. And so I kind of was like, questioned if I should do like one-on-one work online because I was like, that was like the very reason, right, that I got out of or that I started the online business. I actually was still in my office at this point. And so, but I was like, okay, people are asking me to do this. I'm going to just take them on. So I actually started doing one-on-ones, and to this day, I still do one-on-ones. And so I started to like kind of build my online client base, which fast forward to the pandemic was the best decision of my life, honestly. So I started doing the one-on-ones. And then a few months later, I did start to create a program. And it's called Heal Your Hormones Masterclass. I started it in September 2018 is when I first launched that. And there's been a few renditions, obviously constantly working on it, changing it, all of those things. But that was kind of the first, I would say, real course that I created. Like I said, I created the boot camp stuff, which was, had a course to it too. But this was kind of my first baby, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you went the one-on-one route, because I think a lot of us, we want to get to that quote passive income where we throw up a course, it's evergreen, and we make money while we sleep. And it doesn't really work like that. After interviewing multiple dozens of people and going through the experience myself, I can tell you right now, it's not like that. So I think the one-on-one route is a great way, because you really get to work with people, figure out their problems, find out the questions that they're having, and then using that information to craft your program. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think that there's like this misconception, like you said, like the whole reason that I started and that was so intriguing to me, even back to 2010, was like, make money while you sleep, work 4 hours a week, travel wherever, don't really work. I agree with you. Like, I look at a lot of people in all the different industries who I really admire, who are making tons of money, who do have scalable programs, like they still work. I think that that's just like a facade that we buy into sometimes. And, you do still have to work. And so I do think entering into the online space, just offering one-on-one consultations or coaching or whatever is super helpful. Like you said, at building your clientele, building your kind of testimonials, portfolio, whatever you want to call it, getting some followers, getting some word of mouth, getting people interested in you. And I think it's just a really lucrative way to start, because very few people, like I said, I started with a boot camp and I had, 300 friends on Facebook, just people that I had met on my life, and 200 followers on Instagram. Like, that's probably not going to sell a scalable course right away. You need to do a little bit of legwork first before you're ready to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Even when I started this brand, the Online Course Igniter brand last year, I was giving away free strategy sessions just over Zoom call for 30 minutes or an hour, just to figure out, my audience. And like you said,
Mhm.
get that word of mouth. And it helps build confidence too, because once you start helping people, you get a little confidence. You realize, okay, I can do this. This is going to be something that I can turn into something later on. And I feel like that is an awesome way to go about it. So I feel
Mhm.
like more people should do that. They want to jump straight into the course.
Yeah.
Not always the best idea. Sometimes it works, but I like that you took this method. So you are doing these one-on-one coaching sessions, and then you decide in 2018, okay, I want to go ahead and put together a program, which is a completely different animal. How did you go about creating your course? How did you get it up online? Like, what did that process look like to you?
Yeah. So at this point, I was done with the business coaching. I was kind of like by myself. I actually started just writing, and I was like, maybe this should be a book. And I just started like literally took out a Google Doc and just started writing like information I wanted people to know. And I didn't really know what direction it was going to go. And then I looked at it and I was like, this could actually be a course. And so I was really overwhelmed at the point of looking at a Google Doc to making that into a course. So I hired this woman who helped me for like 6 weeks. Just kind of, I got Thinkific to start with. That was my first course platform. And she helped me just kind of like get into the tech part of it and get that information into a course format. And then we did, the whole launch thing, like the webinar and the freebie, and then went into a launch, like sort of like a funnel. And it was it was pretty successful for where I was. Again, it wasn't an Amy Porterfield launch or something like that for sure, but it was fine. It was a good way of me to just kind of get my feet wet and get going. And then from there, I actually in 2019 did a mastermind because I was like, I think this is a good course. I really like it. I just need some strategy of how to do this now. It's been a couple of years since I've been online. I have one-on-ones. I still was in my acupuncture practice actually, and I wanted to kind of start getting out of one-on-ones a little bit more and start really pushing forward with this course. And so I entered into this mastermind, and it was a really great experience. I met lots of great people there, and we did, a couple live launches that year. I think there was maybe 2 live launches that year. Same kind of thing, did like the webinar to lead in. And at that point, I knew that I wasn't going to do the mastermind again in 2020. And so I think Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy, she launched in like September. So I bought that and really dismantled the whole course at that point and like followed her things step by step, like did the course validation, refilmed everything, did new slides, switched over to Kajabi, did all the new stuff, and then launched, verbatim of how she suggested to do it. Then the pandemic came and my whole business really got flipped upside down, to be honest. I had launched that launch, which was great. And then my kids came home from school. So childcare was off the table, no time to really work as much as I was. I had gotten to a place where they were in school and they were growing up a little bit more and able to let me work more than I had in the previous years. And my acupuncture business, we were mandated to close for at least 6 weeks. And I had actually, it's interesting, in that summer before the pandemic started, I was like, at some point, I'm going to need to close the acupuncture practice. Like, I think I wasn't ready to do it yet. And it was sort of like, that was also like a baby. I had like really grinded to grow that for 5 years or 6 years to this point. But I was like, it just really is so much more lucrative to be online. It's scalable. People pay more. Like I didn't have the overhead, right? So it's just so many different situations with that. And I was like, at some point, it's just not going to be worth it for me to come here anymore and pay this overhead. And so that was the catalyst that changed that. And so I was able to switch over to just filling up my one-on-one schedule kind of after my husband got off work, before he went to work. I work with a lot of Eastern time zone people, which is helpful for me actually with scheduling in between like remote school and stuff. And so all of 2020, I would say I kind of took a break from the online course world and just made money through one-on-ones. I just fit them in. I didn't really feel like I had the capacity to like do a full-on launch. Like, launches are beasts.
Mm-hmm.
They're busy. There's a lot of work. That's kind of like an all hands on deck type of thing. And I just didn't feel like I had the capacity to really do it. And last year I did a couple launches, but this year, knock on wood, I think that my kids will be in school and I feel my little one went to kindergarten. And so I feel like in 2022, I will really resume the course creation. I actually have a new idea for a different course, and I started a YouTube channel. And so I feel kind of renewed from the last 2 years, actually.
Are you struggling to create your first online course? Do you have an idea for a course topic, but don't know how to get started? It can be hard trying to figure out everything that goes into course creation. How do you outline your course? How do you set up the technology to create the content? How do you publish it so that you can begin helping others and making money immediately? We know it can be difficult for first-time course creators. That is why we have designed the Start Your First Course Challenge. Our goal is to help you get that online course published within a couple of weeks. That means that you can get your digital product to market without wasting a bunch of time. We will show you how with the easiest methods possible that we have learned and crafted over the years. You'll learn how to choose a topic, outline your course, script what you want to say, and then record the material. After that, you'll discover how to set up the platform and publish it, all with a simple system that's guaranteed to get you results fast. Beat your procrastination by taking action today. Go to startyourfirstcourse.com now to sign up. That's startyourfirstcourse.com. See you in the challenge. So I've got a couple different questions that I want to talk about, just going over some of the stuff that you mentioned here. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, and I try not to harp too much on tools and resources as far as, which platform to choose, because I feel like it's kind of independent on every person and their particular needs. But I did notice you say that you went from Thinkific to Kajabi. Anyone who's listening that isn't aware, Thinkific is a course hosting platform. Kajabi does a lot more. It's more of an all-in-one platform. But what was the reason for you wanting to switch over to Kajabi? And how do you like Kajabi?
I love Kajabi. Kajabi's wonderful. I had a couple friends that had been on Kajabi that like switched over from different email service providers. Because like you said, you can make landing pages on there. You can make your course on there. You can do, it's an email service provider. You can do everything on there and it's super easy. So that was sort of like one of the reasons. I also, Amy Porterfield and Digital Course Academy uses that, and all the tech videos are about Kajabi. And I felt like Thinkific, I think they've really come a long way, I have to say. I have a couple friends and stuff that use Thinkific now, and it's definitely much better. I felt like it was just a little bit, just a little behind, maybe like I don't know, just like the tech pieces of things. And I didn't really love some of the like buttons on there and like the funnels and stuff on there. It just was a little bit maybe behind at the
A little
point.
outdated. Yeah.
But I do think it's much better now, actually.
Yeah, they've done a lot of improvements. When they came out, it was a really amazing platform when it was new, like you said, and then they kind of went stagnant for a little bit, and then they have done some upgrades. It's the two that you mentioned are probably my two favorite platforms. I really enjoy Thinkific, and I really like Kajabi. Again, depending on what you
Yeah.
need done. If you're using Thinkific, you got to piece together your email autoresponder and your landing page software. So Kajabi is a nice, if you're going to spend the money on all those and you don't have those pieces already, Kajabi is a great platform because that means you can just get everything in one go, and it's all interconnected. It works together seamlessly, which I think is pretty awesome. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that. I wanted to ask you too, and this is going back for a minute because you were talking about in the beginning, you started a podcast, and you said that was kind of one of your main drivers. What do you think of podcasting? Do you feel like that helped your business out as far as marketing, getting traffic, getting your name out there?
I love podcasting. I've been doing it for several years now on the Allie Dameron show. So I started a different one like back in the day, and then I stopped doing that one, took a break, kind of focused on my brick and mortar. And then, like I said, when I kind of started this last 5 years, I did a different one called the Allie Dameron show. And yes, I do. For new people out there, like looking at numbers where like you're looking at your posts and you're getting a few likes, and you're looking at podcast numbers and they're low, or you're looking at email open rates and they're low, like just because people aren't engaging with you necessarily and like shouting you out all the time doesn't mean they're not paying attention. So that was a huge lesson for me. I think in the early days of the podcast, it was slow going. Like it was very low growth for a while. I didn't really know how to grow a podcast. I was just kind of like doing it, posting it on social media. I wasn't doing like SEO with it or anything at that point. But I continuously had people that were like, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." Like when they would hire me as one-on-one or even my current one-on-one patients. And still to this day, they do that. And so I just want to encourage you, like, don't pay attention always to like the metrics and get really bogged down by that. Obviously, they're important and we want to grow and see what's working and test and stuff. But also, there's a lot of people who you don't think are paying attention that just don't engage right away. That actually are. And so, yes, I do think that that's been a huge help in growing my business.
Yeah, I totally agree. Earlier in the episode, you mentioned Pat Flynn, who is someone that I followed when he first came out. I'm sure a lot of the audience listening knows who that is. And I stalked him for a long time before I purchased anything from him. So from his angle, he had no idea who I was, still doesn't know who I am, but I stalked him. I read his blog post. I watched his stuff online. And, a couple years down the road when he came out with his podcasting course, and I wanted to create a podcast and get some tips and tricks, he was a person I went to. He had built that reputation and that authority inside of my mind for years, So I think that's some great advice is, don't give up, keep trucking. You don't know who's paying attention and who's listening to you. Even if you never meet them, they might end up being a customer one day. So that's pretty awesome. And then you mentioned starting the YouTube channel. How's that performing?
So it's good. So I started doing that. I don't know if you know who Sunny Lenarduzzi is.
Oh, yeah. I want to get her on the podcast if you can
Yeah,
introduce me.
she's wonderful. I bought her, I don't think she does it anymore, but it's called YouTube for Bosses. And so I did her course. I did Pat Flynn's course back in the day to do the podcast. I did, Amy Porterfield's course to do the digital course. And then I did hers for YouTube. Over the years, I've learned that it's easier to follow the path of somebody who's already done it. Like I could
Hmm.
have thrown up YouTube videos and through doing like her course, like how she does the long-term keywords and, just so many tips and tricks in there. Like I would have been spinning my wheels forever and had like no idea why I was getting 2 views. It's still slow growing. I just started it probably in the fall, like later fall. So I have like 19 videos up right now. But I think that there's a ton of potential. I think that YouTube is cool because obviously it's like a search engine and also because you can create kind of like a library. So like podcasts you can too, but it's a little bit more difficult to search podcasts out, like specific episodes. It's easier to do that on YouTube, I think. So my goal is just to have a lot of like evergreen content on there that people just continuously go back to. And YouTube's algorithm keeps promoting because it's timeless content, which obviously a podcast is too, but it's a little different. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Absolutely. I mean, no one is going into a podcast platforming and typing in, why do I have insomnia? But they do type that on YouTube, which could be a keyword that you could rank for, get your views, and then, promote your stuff through there. I totally agree. They're kind of different animals. I feel like a podcasting is great for exposure, for building your brand, building your authority. And then YouTube does the same thing, but like you said, it has that search functionality where people are looking for specific answers to things. And I feel like YouTube is probably one of the best platforms to transition people into an online course because they get to see you, see how you teach, see how you train and do your videos. And if they like that, that's like an easy step into a course, right?
Yeah, I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, absolutely.
If you're listening to an interview or like for instance, if I wanted to promote a course from here, it's kind of a big leap. They're listening to an interview in your story, and now I want to sell them on my coaching program. It's kind of a jump. But if someone's already searching for information on women's hormones and women's health, and then you say, "Hey, I have a course on this," that's a smaller leap. I feel in my eyes.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited for you with the YouTube channel. I'm right behind you. I started mine this year. I've got one video up, but I plan on putting at least 50, 52 videos this year. So it'll be nice to see how each other grows throughout the year, and we can help support each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is webinars. I noticed that you said you had done webinars in the past to sell some of your products. I know that being an AB Porterfield follower myself, she does a lot of webinars. So, what are your thoughts on webinars? We'll start there, and then I'll ask you a couple follow up questions. How do you feel about webinars?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think, 5 years ago, even I remember my business coach at that time being like, webinars are dead. Like they used to work great. Emails dead, webinars are dead. They're all dead. And I think we've all come full circle in realizing that that's not the case. Like an email list is gold. And also, I think because webinars and email lists are so interconnected, being that you have to enter your email to come to the webinar, I think that it's an amazing thing. I think you have to market it right. So I think you have to have a good name. I think you have to explain what they're going to get out of it. But I do think the people who do show up to webinars like are usually pretty engaged in the topic and the conversation. I think if you make it like a little bit more conversational, like they can post in the chat and you kind of like talk to them and stuff, I feel like that's a pretty good way to sell courses. Obviously, there's ways to sort of like you teach and then you sort of like lead into like, hey, if you want more of this information, I do have this course, it's launching this date or whatever. I'm a big fan of it. I call them like trainings or master classes or something like that, workshops, instead of like webinars. I think maybe that word might be a little old, but yeah, I think they work fantastic.
Nice. And how do you structure your webinar? Do you have a certain way of going about it? I know that there's a couple different structures people use as far as you have your intro story, you have your 3 secrets, then you promote at the end. Do you follow any kind of structure like that?
I do. So again, my first one that I did when I was just kind of like, oh, I should do a webinar was it was an okay structure, but again, in Digital Course Academy, she literally tells you slide by slide what to put in there. So it's like why you're here, kind of just talking to them like you're here because you're frustrated about this situation or you really want to, do this or whatever. Just kind of like getting them to be like, yeah, I do want to do this, or I am frustrated with this. And then, talking about yourself, like explaining your education, kind of getting them to know you a little bit more, whatever. And then, yeah, like teaching, kind of giving them the why in the like problem, but not necessarily the how. So you want to like teach a little bit, give them like a takeaway, but you don't want to give them too much, right? Because some people will leave a webinar being like, wow, that was so much information. I'm going to just go try all the things that she mentioned. And then they don't feel like they need the course because they have so much to do already. So you want them to feel like they leave the training kind of desiring more. You don't have to necessarily do it this way, but Amy Porterfield, the way she does it is like, so the way I see it now, you have two options. You can either continue at this on your own and, XYZ, feel frustrated about not building a business or feel frustrated about your hormones, or you can do it from a professional who's been there, who knows how to do this, and you can just follow the step-by-step program. And then she kind of just goes into the program then.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. It's very similar to what I follow and what I've seen in the marketing world. And I like what you said about being interactive, chatting with people. I feel like some webinars are just so boring because the person just gets up on there and talks and talks and talks. And I think that if you add some of that interaction element to it, if you can get them to respond in the chat, I've even thought about having maybe like a worksheet or something for them to do while they're there, so they feel like they're actually like learning something, while they're sitting there. I think is pretty big too. Have you done anything like that before?
Yeah, I do think it's important, even with YouTube too. So this is like a random thing, but my kids love to watch like YouTube people like doing stunts or whatever. And they'll just be like randomly like, oh, hey, in the chat, like post if you like blue or orange, or like what flavor of popsicle do you like, if they're talking about that or whatever, just to like get people engaged. And that obviously helps the algorithm as well. But I think for webinars too, like same thing. If you ask them like specific questions throughout the time. So like if I'm talking about insomnia, like, oh, hey, do you guys have insomnia? Or have you tried magnesium for insomnia? Post in the chat for me and let me know. And then you just kind of like read through it. You're like, oh yeah, Susan's tried this, or Amy's not tried this, or, whatever. And you just sort of like keep drawing them in throughout it. And I think I'm similar to you, just kind of an informal, like conversationalist. And so I don't love having like scripts, and that part of the webinar from Amy Porterfield was a little hard for me. Because there was like specific things. She's like, you want to say this here. And it felt a little scripted, and I'm not very good at that. And so I do think it's just good to be informal, be yourself, just kind of like draw them in. And I think people can like feel that, right? They can feel if you're energetic and you want to help them and you're trying to draw them in versus like, again, that boring, like you're just teaching and kind of like talking to a wall or down to people or trying to sell something. Like that's not cool.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like people feed off of that energy when you're calling them out, asking questions, especially if you say their name. I think is really cool because I've been on webinars before. I know what people are doing. I'm in the industry, and I still get excited when someone's like, "Oh, Jeremy Deegan from Florida." I'm like, "Oh my God, that's me!" So I think that's a lot of fun. I think it's really great to involve yourself. Show some of your personality and your character. That's what people are buying. They're buying the result, and they're buying you, not necessarily just your program, So I think that's really cool. Just real quick, what do you use to present your webinar? Do you just do it on a Zoom or through Kajabi, or how are you presenting your webinars?
I like Demio a lot. Demio is a really great program. They like let you schedule it. So how there's like some people will do like multiple times and whatever. It's a really nice software for like integrating email, like when you get really complex with like the tags and like, oh, this person signed up for this time of webinar and this person signed up for the other time, like the funnel that comes after that and stuff. It's a nice integrative software for webinars. So I really like Demio. You can like put up slides beforehand and upload those, and it just makes it a little bit more seamless.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I'll link all these resources in the show notes for people to go check out. This has been a great talk. I feel like I could ask you a lot more questions. We're kind of coming up on the time a little bit, but I think you just have a wealth of knowledge and information that you've shared today, and I really do appreciate it. One thing that I just want to say to the audience listening that I think is important is that you, Ali, have gone out and have studied the information that you wanted to learn when it was appropriate. You wanted to create a podcast, you took a podcasting course. You wanted to learn YouTube, you took a YouTube course. You want to learn webinars, you took a webinar course. I think that's important. I think that we're so afraid to spend money and take the time and try to figure it out on our own and bootstrap and all these words. But I feel like you said, if you find someone who is doing it, who is an expert, who's been through those struggles and trials. I mean, Amy Porterfield has put in hundreds of webinars. She knows what she's doing, right? Like, so go find that person, listen to what they say, copy them, not copy them verbatim, but figure out
Right.
why they're doing things the way that they're doing. I think that you've made a great choice in doing that. So I appreciate that. Just thinking about the person out there who's just getting started in their journey, who maybe hasn't created a course yet, or they're struggling kind of like in the beginning phases where you're not making a lot of money and you're just kind of having a hard time. What would be some advice that you could get to that one person who's listening today, who's just getting their feet wet in this online course creation business?
So I think a couple things. So I think consistency is like the most important thing. I really fully believe that if you continuously show up, your success is inevitable. It may be slower than other people's, it may be faster, who knows? But I do think, posting on social media consistently, sending out emails, trying to grow your email list, like it's going to take years. And that's not something with instant gratification that we are constantly told, but you just keep showing up. And I think, kind of back to our one conversation, offer one-on-one coaching. You can get individual people to buy into what you're saying if you just continuously talk to your audience of like the words they use, the messages that they use, the questions they ask you. Do that, post those things on social media, offer just one-on-one coaching, and it'll take off. It'll, slowly keep building momentum for you, and then you can be ready to build a course. But like I said, when I first started with the boot camps and stuff, I was literally wringing a wet rag, and I just got to the point where like that was it. I had no one else to sell this program to. I had to pivot. I had no choice.
Nice. Yeah, that's some great advice. And I really do appreciate it. And just looking at your business going forward in the future, maybe in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, where do you see yourself? Where would you like to take this business now?
I really am excited about YouTube. I love doing video. I love connecting with people that way. And so I'm excited to kind of keep growing that. I also really would like to continue with sort of like the evergreen model of course creation. And I also, at a point where I am doing less one-on-ones and have a little bit more time freed up, I would really love to do like a higher end mentorship, either business coaching for coaches who are like health coaches who are interested in learning hormones, or just women who are interested in healing their hormones. I'm kind of at capacity right now. So I think that's going to have to wait a little bit, but that would be a goal for sure.
Nice. I love it. Well, you got to set big goals and then just take the baby steps to get there. And I know you'll get there eventually. And you've been a pleasure to talk to today. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all this great information and knowledge. We'll make sure that we link up your YouTube channel, your website, all the links and resources that we can in the show notes of this episode. And if people want to find you online, where can they do that?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's alidamron.com. I also have a free Facebook group called Holistic Health with Ali Damron that is one of my very favorite parts of my business, actually. It's a really great group of supportive women, and you can just chime in, ask questions about hormones, women health, whatever. I also, like you said, have the podcast, The Ali Damron Show, and the YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect. We'll link all those up in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Ali. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you have a great day and a great future and beyond.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking to you too.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ali. You can find out more about her and her business by visiting alidamron.com, or you can get the show notes of this episode along with links and resources by visiting onlinecourseigniter.com/74. Keep showing up out there, and I'll be sure to show up next week with an all-new episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Online Course Igniter podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening so that you don't miss an episode. If you would like to learn more marketing strategies and how to sell your online course, then also check out our free community where we share tips, tricks, and tutorials at onlinecourseigniter.com/community.